Dr. Jessica Brooks hadn't slept in 36 hours, but that wasn't what worried her. It was the pattern in the signal, or rather, the pattern of panic within the signal, that kept her wide-eyed and hunched over her terminal at NASA's SETI lab. The incoming transmissions weren't the usual background static of space. They were ordered, deliberate, and absolutely terrified. "Run it again, ARIA." She commanded the lab's AI system, rubbing her temples. The holographic display flickered to life, showing waves of light-based communications that resembled nothing in their database. But there was something eerily familiar about their rhythm. "Dr. Brooks," Aria's voice was calm, almost too calm. "The pattern matches human circadian rhythms at 99.8% inverse correlation." Jessica straightened in her chair. "They're reacting to our sleep cycles. That's impossible. Show me the global scale." The display expanded, revealing a planetary view. Every night, as darkness swept across Earth's continents, the alien signals intensified. They weren't random bursts of communication. They were response patterns, growing more agitated as each time zone entered its natural sleep cycle. "Get me Director Morrison," Jessica said, but her fingers were already flying across the haptic interface, compiling the data. "This isn't just first contact. This is first contact with a species that's fundamentally disturbed by one of our most basic biological functions." The lab door hissed open, admitting a tall man in a rumpled suit. Director James Morrison looked like he'd dressed in a hurry, his tie askew. "This better be worth dragging me out of bed at 3 a.m., Brooks." "Look at this," Jessica gestured to the display. "They're not trying to communicate with us. They're reacting to us. More specifically, they're reacting to our darkness." Morrison squinted at the patterns. "That's a hell of a claim. Where's your proof?" As if on cue, ARIA announced, "Incoming object detected. Upper atmosphere entry consistent with controlled descent. Estimated touchdown. Nevada test range." Jessica's heart raced. Their first probe. "Director, we need tow." "Already on it." Morrison was on his phone, barking orders. "I want a containment team ready in 20. Brooks, you're with me." 3 hours later, Jessica stood in a hastily assembled clean room, staring at what looked like a crystalline teardrop, roughly the size of a car. The probe pulsed with internal light, creating patterns that ARIA was already trying to decode. "Remarkable construction." Dr. Patel, their materials expert, muttered beside her. "It's like it's made of pure, structured light." Jessica moved closer, her hazmat suit crinkling. Something about the probe's rhythmic pulsing troubled her. It was too regular, too anxious, like a heartbeat in panic. "Let's see what we're dealing with," she said, reaching for the light controls. Starting full spectrum analysis. Dimming lights to 50% for better readings. The probe's reaction was instant and violent. As the room's lighting decreased, its pulsing became erratic, the crystalline structure vibrating at increasing frequencies. Warning alarms blared. "Energy spike." Someone shouted. "Lights," Jessica yelled. "Get the lights back up." But it was too late. The probe's vibrations reached a crescendo, and with a flash that turned the darkened room briefly into noon, it exploded. The reinforced walls contained the blast. But the message was clear. Whatever had sent this probe was deeply, fundamentally disturbed by darkness. As emergency teams swept in, Jessica stood motionless, her mind racing. The aliens weren't just afraid of the dark. They were afraid of humanity's relationship with it. Every human on Earth spent roughly 8 hours a day voluntarily embracing darkness, and to these beings, that was apparently horrifying. "Director," she said, turning to Morrison, who looked shaken but thoughtful. "I don't think this was just a probe. I think it was a warning. And we just confirmed their worst fears." "How so?" "We showed them that we don't just coexist with darkness," Jessica replied, a chill running down her spine. "We control it. And to them, that makes us more terrifying than anything they've ever encountered." The implications were staggering. Humanity had just made first contact, and their most basic natural function, the need for sleep, had marked them as an evolutionary horror to the stars. Captain Michael Hayes stood at rigid attention in the Joint Chiefs briefing room, trying not to squint at the beings of pure light hovering before him. 3 weeks since the probe incident, and here they were, actual aliens, looking like Aurora Borealis squeezed into vaguely humanoid shapes. They're called the Celestial Consortium, General Roberts explained, his weathered face illuminated by the aliens' glow. And Captain Hayes, you're now humanity's first diplomatic security chief. Hayes nodded, keeping his expression neutral despite the gravity of the assignment. 15 years of Marine Corps service hadn't prepared him for this. The floating light beings pulsed with what he'd learned was their form of speech, their translator converting it to English. We must discuss your species. Aberration. The tallest celestial spoke, its voice a harmonic blend of chimes. This voluntary consciousness termination cycle. You mean sleep? Hayes asked, carefully maintaining eye contact with what he hoped was the alien's face. It's not termination. It's restoration. Every human needs it. The Celestials rippled with visible distress, their light dimming momentarily. The conference room's backup generators hummed to life, responding to the power fluctuation their agitation caused. Impossible. Another Celestial chimed in, its tone sharp like breaking crystal. Consciousness requires constant light and energy exchange. Your species deliberately enters void states. It defies natural law. Hayes was about to respond when the lights flickered. A minor power surge. What happened next would be seared into his memory forever. The Celestial diplomats screamed. It wasn't a sound so much as a feeling, a psychic blast of pure terror that brought everyone in the room to their knees. In the 3 seconds before the backup power kicked in, Hayes witnessed what true alien panic looked like. Their luminous forms contracted, sending out desperate pulses of light like dying stars. When full power returned, the Celestials had retreated to the corners of the room, their light barely controlled. Jesus, General Roberts whispered, pulling himself up from the floor. All that from a 1-second blackout. Hayes' tactical mind was already racing. This wasn't just diplomatic sensitivity. It was a critical vulnerability. You've never experienced darkness, he asked the still trembling aliens. The lead Celestial's voice wavered. Our species evolved from pure energy. We are beings of continuous light, of unbroken consciousness. Darkness is death. Yet your kind embraces it, seeks it out. Even your entertainment occurs in darkened rooms. Movies, Hayes realized. You're talking about movies, theater. Your young request darkness for sleep. Your couples seek darkness for intimacy. Your religious structures incorporate darkness in ritual. The Celestial's light pulsed faster. Do you not understand? Your entire species treats the void as a companion rather than an enemy. Hayes met General Roberts' gaze, seeing his own realization mirrored there. Humanity's relationship with darkness wasn't just different, it was fundamentally threatening to these beings. Perhaps, Hayes said carefully, we could demonstrate how we use darkness productively. Controlled environments where. The translator erupted in discordant tones as all 3 Celestials flared simultaneously. No demonstrations. The void must not be treated as a tool. This is why the consortium sent us. Your species must be guided, enlightened. There it was. Hayes felt his jaw tighten. 15 years of reading tactical situations hadn't failed him yet. This wasn't just culture shock. It was the prelude to forced conversion. Enlightened, he repeated flatly. And if we prefer our natural cycles. The lead Celestial's light took on a harder edge. Then you will be contained. For the galaxy's safety. We have encountered species who embraced darkness before. They did not survive first contact. The threat hung in the air like static electricity. Hayes stood straighter, letting his shadow fall across the conference table. He didn't miss how the Celestials recoiled from it. I suggest, he said quietly, that you consider very carefully what it means to threaten a species that doesn't fear what terrifies you most. The room's lights flickered again, this time from the Celestial's own distress at his words. Hayes allowed himself a small smile. They had just revealed their greatest weakness to a Marine. And every Marine knows that when you find a weakness, you plan around it. Commander Ashley Richardson stood at the helm of the U.S. Nighthawk, watching the holographic display as 3 celestial warships entered scanning range. Their crystalline forms blazed against the void of space, beautiful and deadly. "Status report," she ordered, keeping her voice steady despite the tension humming through the bridge. "They're broadcasting something called the Silence Protocol." Lieutenant Chen reported from communications. "Universal quarantine orders for void entities." He looked up, confusion clear on his face. "Ma'am, they're classifying us as a biohazard." Ashley's jaw tightened. The Nighthawk was running a standard stealth patrol. Minimal emissions, reduced power signature, the kind of operation humans have perfected over decades of space exploration. Nothing that should warrant this response. "They're targeting our reactor core," Tactical Officer James Wilson announced, his fingers dancing across the haptic controls. "Energy signatures building. Those aren't warning shots they're charging. Show me their firing solutions," Ashley commanded. The holographic display shifted, revealing predicted weapon trajectories. The Celestials had them bracketed. Standard containment formation. Standard for beings of light, that is. "All hands," Ashley's voice carried through the ship's comm system. "Initiate Protocol Umbra. This is not a drill. Repeat, Protocol Umbra is now in effect." Throughout the Nighthawk, safety lights shifted to deep red. Systems powered down in cascading sequence, leaving only life support and minimal navigation. The bridge plunged into near darkness, illuminated only by essential displays. Hull temperature dropping, engineering reported. "We're going dark, Commander." On the tactical display, the celestial ship's formations began to waver. Their perfect triangular approach destabilized as the Nighthawk's signature disappeared from their light-based sensors. "They're panicking," Wilson observed, his face ghostly in the dim red light. "Their formations. It's like they can't maintain coherence when they can't see us." Ashley allowed herself a grim smile. Captain Hayes' report from the first diplomatic contact had been right. The Celestials' fear of darkness wasn't just cultural, it was physiological. And now they faced a ship that could vanish into their worst nightmare. "New transmission," Chen called out. They're screaming, ma'am. Not in pain, but in fear. Their ships are actually radiating terror." The tactical display told the story. The celestial vessel's perfect formation had dissolved into chaos. Their light-based weapons, calibrated for illuminated targets, swept uselessly through the darkness. The Nighthawk, running silent and dark, might as well have been a ghost. "Plot a course between their ships," Ashley ordered. "Let's show them exactly what a void entity can do." The Nighthawk glided through space, its black hull absorbing what little light reached it. On the display, the celestial ships scattered like startled fish, their crews unable to maintain combat effectiveness in the presence of something that embraced darkness so completely. "They're retreating," Wilson announced, a note of awe in his voice. "No shots fired. They're actually running from us." "Broadcast on all frequencies," Ashley commanded. "Celestial vessels, this is Commander Richardson. Your silence protocol is noted, but be advised, humanity doesn't fear the dark. We master it. Remember that before you try to quarantine us again." The Nighthawk sensors registered a massive energy surge as the celestial ships engaged their faster-than-light drives, fleeing the scene like they'd encountered something from their darkest nightmares. Which, Ashley realized, they had. "Return to normal operations," she ordered, "and get me a secure line to Fleet Command. They need to know that the Celestials just tried to quarantine an Earth vessel and failed because they never considered that darkness could be an advantage." As the bridge lights gradually returned to normal, Ashley studied the retreat vectors of the celestial ships. Their terror of darkness had turned a potential firefight into a bloodless victory, but she knew this was just the beginning. "Commander," Chen spoke up, his expression troubled. "We're picking up similar reports from across human space. The silence protocol isn't just for us. They're trying to quarantine Earth itself." Ashley nodded grimly. The Celestials had just revealed both their intentions and their greatest weakness. Now humanity knew exactly what they were dealing with, and exactly how to fight back. The darkness that terrified their enemies was humanity's oldest friend. Jake Sullivan wasn't trying to make history aboard the Silent Runner. He was just trying to deliver medical supplies to Europa when 3 celestial warships dropped out of hyperspace, their crystalline hulls blazing like angry stars. "Multiple targeting locks," his XO, Sarah Cooper, announced from the tactical station. Her fingers flew across the controls, bringing up defensive screens. "They're charging weapons." Jake felt the familiar calm of combat settling over him, muscle memory from his SEAL days taking over. Why aren't they broadcasting demands? Pirates at least tell you what they want. "No demands," Sarah confirmed. "Just energy readings climbing to weapons critical." The Silent Runner was a modified cargo hauler, quick but not built for combat. Against 3 warships, they had about as much chance as a rowboat against a carrier group. Unless everyone remember their blackout drills. Jake asked, his hand hovering over a certain red switch he'd installed after hearing about the Nighthawk incident. His small crew, all former Special Operations personnel, nodded. They'd practiced this, even if they'd never done it for real. "Kill everything," Jake ordered. Total blackout. Now, the bridge plunged into darkness as systems shut down in rapid sequence. Emergency lighting, life support backups, even the helmet lights on their pressure suits, all dark. The only illumination came from the distant stars and the harsh glow of the approaching celestial vessels. "They're starting to destabilize," Sarah whispered, watching through light-amplifying goggles. "Just like the reports said. Their formation's breaking up." Jake nodded, remembering his night operations training. The darkness had always been a SEAL's best friend. Now it might save his ship. The tactical display, dimmed to near invisibility, showed the celestial ship's perfect attack pattern dissolving into chaos. Their light-based sensors, designed to track energy emissions, found nothing. The Silent Runner might as well have been a hole in space. But it wasn't enough. One celestial ship, braver or more desperate than the others, maintained its pursuit. "They're firing," Sarah called out. Jake's hand found the controls without needing light. "Brace for midnight run." The Silent Runner's modified engines kicked in, running on minimal power. In total darkness, Jake guided his ship straight toward the firing celestial vessel, a move so suicidal it hadn't occurred to their attackers as possible. The celestial ship's weapons blazed, lighting up space like daybreak. But they were firing at the Silent Runner's last known position, not where it was now. "Point-blank range," Sarah reported, her voice tight. "They still can't see us." Jake allowed himself a predator's smile in the darkness. "Let's show them why humans tell ghost stories." He activated the ship's external speakers, broadcasting a sound that had terrified humans for millennia. The low, hollow moan of wind through an empty corridor. The kind of sound that triggered primal fears of darkness and the unknown. The effect on the celestial ship was immediate and devastating. Its crystalline structure actually flickered, like a candle in a wind that couldn't exist in space. The other 2 ships broke formation entirely, their crews' panic overwhelming their military discipline. "They're crying out on all frequencies," Sarah reported, a note of awe in her voice. They're calling us Void Walkers. They think we're some kind of space ghost." "Record everything," Jake ordered. "Fleet Command needs to see this. We just found out that psychological warfare works on beings of pure light." As the celestial ships flood, their retreat casting prismatic patterns across the Silent Runner's dark hull, Jake realized they'd stumbled onto something bigger than a tactical advantage. They'd discovered an entirely new kind of warfare. "Send word to command," he said, finally allowing the emergency lights to come back up. "Tell them the silent runner just proved that darkness isn't just our defense. It's our weapon. And the Celestials have no defense against what they fear most." Sarah nodded, already composing the message. "Think they'll come back?" "Oh, they'll be back," Jake replied, watching the last traces of celestial light fade from his viewers. "But next time, they'll be the ones afraid of what's hiding in the dark." Because that's what humans had mastered over countless generations, making peace with the darkness while everyone else feared it. Intelligence officer Olivia Martinez had infiltrated numerous hostile environments during her career, but Europa's underground ocean took deep cover to a whole new level. The massive ice cavern, illuminated only by bioluminescent algae, housed the most unusual gathering in human history. The Shadow Conclave welcomes Earth's representative, rumbled a massive creature that looked like a cross between a whale and a deep-sea anglerfish. Its translator rendered perfect English, despite speaking from within a water-filled environment suit. "The honor is ours, Ambassador Cthulhu," Olivia replied, trying not to stare at the dozens of other species gathered in the massive chamber. Cave-dwelling beings from gas-giant moons, crystalline entities that absorbed light rather than emitting it, and species that had evolved in the darkness between stars, all of them victims of the Celestial Consortium's Enlightenment campaign. "We have watched your people's resistance with great interest," a voice whispered from the shadows. A shroud walker emerged, a being composed of what appeared to be living darkness. "You are the first species to actively fight back." Olivia accessed her tablet, bringing up footage from the Silent Runner incident. "We've learned that their fear of darkness isn't just cultural, it's existential. They can't comprehend how we function without constant light." The consortium calls this gathering heretical. Cthulhu's massive form shifted in his containment suit. They claim evolution in darkness is an aberration. Yet here we are, dozens of species, all thriving in what they fear most. "That's why we're here," Olivia said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "Earth proposes an alliance. The Celestials control trade routes because they've convinced the galaxy that darkness is death. But we can prove them wrong." A holographic display activated, showing human ships running dark through celestial blockades. "We can navigate what they fear, create safe passages for species they've quarantined, build a network of shadow routes that..." Alarm sirens cut through the chamber. A deep dweller rushed in, its crystalline form absorbing ambient light. "Celestial patrol ships, they've detected our energy signatures." Olivia's training kicked in. Everyone maintained calm. "This is why we chose Europa." Lieutenant Hayes. From the shadows, a dozen human special forces operators emerged, their suits designed to blend with darkness. "Shadow protocols active, ma'am. Cavern defenses online." The chamber's bioluminescent lighting dimmed to near blackness. In the darkness, Olivia heard the assembled species gasp, not in fear, but in appreciation. "Watch," she told them as the cave's external sensors activated. Above the ice shell, 3 celestial ships hung in space, their light-based sensors probing for signs of life. But the cavern's specially designed walls, developed using human stealth technology, absorbed and redirected their scans. To their sensors, Europa's underground ocean was simply a void. "They fear this," the Shroud Walker observed. "The nothing. The silence. They cannot comprehend that life thrives here." "Exactly," Olivia smiled in the darkness. "And that's our advantage." The consortium built their empire on light, convinced nothing could exist without it. They never looked in the shadows. The assembled species moved closer, their various forms of dark-adapted vision allowing them to see perfectly. "What do you propose?" Hill asked. "An alliance. The Shadow Confederation. While the Celestials panic at darkness, we'll build a new network of trade routes, settlements, and diplomatic channels, all running dark. They can't stop what they can't see." A murmur of approval rippled through the gathering. Species that had been isolated by celestial quarantines saw hope in the darkness humans had mastered. "We accept," the shrewd walker announced, others quickly joining in agreement. Above, the celestial ships moved on, their sensors finding nothing but ice and void. They never realized they'd just passed over the birth of a revolution, one born in the darkness they so feared. Olivia watched them go, knowing humanity had just changed the galaxy's balance of power, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through their simple ability to thrive in the dark. "Welcome," she told the assembled species, "to the Shadow Revolution." In the darkness of Europa's ocean, a new alliance was born, one that would show the galaxy that light wasn't the only path to evolution. Admiral David Cooper stood in the U.S. Nightweaver's command center, studying the holographic map of what his team had dubbed the Twilight Network. Hundreds of dark corridors crisscrossed celestial space, invisible highways where ships could travel undetected through the light-saturated empire. "Phase 3 is ready, Admiral," Dr. Ryan Thompson announced, his eyes gleaming with the excitement of scientific breakthrough. The young physicist had become the architect of humanity's void technology, turning darkness itself into a navigable medium. "Show me," Cooper ordered, watching as the hologram shifted to display their most ambitious project yet. Thompson gestured, and a new layer appeared on the map, a massive dark corridor connecting the Orion Arm to the Perseus Arm. "We're calling it the Shadow Lane. Using synchronized void generators, we can create a permanent dark passage large enough for capital ships." "And the Celestials?" Cooper asked, though he already knew the answer. "They'll avoid it like the plague. Our psychological analysis shows they physically can't approach areas of sustained darkness. Their ships automatically reroute around dark zones. It's hardwired into their navigation systems." Cooper nodded, remembering the first time he'd witnessed a celestial ship's reaction to darkness. Their terror wasn't just fear. It was existential panic, like humans encountering a void in reality itself. "Launch countdown initiated," the ship's AI announced. All void generators synchronized. Cooper keyed the fleet-wide comm. "All ships, maintain position. Remember, we're not just building a trade route, we're rewriting the rules of space travel." Around the Nightweaver, 30 human vessels held formation, each equipped with Thompson's void generators. At precise coordinates, they would activate simultaneously, tearing a corridor of darkness through celestial space. "Energy signatures detected," Tactical reported. 3 celestial patrol fleets approaching. "Right on schedule," Cooper smiled. "They always check disturbances in their light network." "Lieutenant Chen, initiate Shadow Protocol Alpha." The Nightweaver's external lights died, followed by its sister ships. In seconds, the entire human fleet vanished from conventional sensors, becoming invisible holes in space. The incoming celestial ships slowed, their crystalline forms pulsing with obvious distress. Their light-based communications became erratic, broadcasting fear on all frequencies. "Now," Cooper ordered. 30 void generators activated simultaneously. A wave of darkness swept through space, not just absence of light, but something deeper. A controlled zone of pure shadow. The effect on the celestial ships was immediate and devastating. Their formation shattered. Several ships tried to flee, their crews overwhelmed by primal terror. Others simply froze, their light dimming to barely visible glows. "Shadow lane stabilizing," Thompson reported, his fingers dancing across control surfaces. "The dark corridor is self-sustaining. We did it, Admiral. We just carved a permanent shadow through their empire." Cooper watched as the first ships from the Shadow Confederation emerged from hiding, massive freighters from the deep ocean worlds, crystalline vessels that absorbed light rather than emitting it, living ships that navigated by gravity rather than sight. All the species the Celestials had tried to quarantine, now flowing freely through their newly created darkness. "Message from Shadow Command," communications announced. The Deep Dweller Trade Fleet reports successful passage. The Shrewdwalker Diplomatic Corps is requesting transit clearance. Granted. Cooper ordered. The Shadow Lane is open to all Confederation members. He turned to Thompson, who was still fine-tuning the void generators. How long until the Celestials realize what we've done? They already know, Thompson grinned, but they can't do anything about it. We've basically created their version of haunted space, areas they physically can't enter without experiencing total psychological breakdown. Cooper nodded, watching another group of ships disappear into the artificial night. The Celestials had built their empire on the assumption that light was the only path to civilization. Humanity had just proved them wrong, using their greatest fear as a tool for liberation. Send word to Earth, he ordered. Tell them the Shadow Lane is operational. The galaxy's first dark trade route is open for business. In the viewport, the darkness they'd created stretched into infinity, a road of shadows leading to freedom for countless species. The Celestials had called humanity void entities. They were about to learn just how right they were. Dr. Emma Blackwood's hand trembled as she lifted the ancient celestial crystal from its containment field. The lightless vault deep beneath the Lunar Research Station had become her second home over the past 3 months. But this was different. This crystal wasn't just a record, it was a confession. Begin playback, she commanded. Standard translation protocols. The crystal activated, but instead of the usual brilliant light display, it emitted a soft, almost mournful glow. A voice emerged, speaking in translated English that carried the weight of millennia. I am High Archon Luminara, and this is the true history of our fall. Emma's breath caught. The High Archons were legendary figures in celestial history, but their records were supposedly lost eons ago. The crystal's glow formed images in the air, a magnificent star system with twin suns, populated by beings of pure light. The celestial homeworld, before everything changed. We were children of endless day. Luminara's voice continued. Our binary stars guaranteed eternal light, eternal life. We never knew darkness could exist until the dimming. The projection shifted, showing one of the stars beginning to fail. Emma watched, transfixed, as the recording displayed the panic spreading through celestial society. The stellar anomaly was unprecedented. For the first time in our species' history, shadows fell across our world. Billions died in those first moments, their consciousness shattered by an experience we had no context for. The images showed celestial cities going dark, their inhabitants dissolving into nothingness as the light failed. Emma's scientific mind raced, connecting pieces of a puzzle that had eluded them all. We survived by transferring our remaining population to emergency light generation facilities, Luminara explained, but the damage was done. Our species had experienced extinction-level trauma. The fear of darkness became encoded in our very essence. Emma grabbed her tablet, fingers flying across the surface. Computer, cross-referenced these events with astronomical records. When did their binary star system experience this failure? Approximately 47,000 years ago. The computer responded, correlating with the formation of the Celestial Consortium and the beginning of their Enlightenment crusade. Everything clicked into place. The Celestials' aggressive expansion, their obsession with illuminating every corner of space, their terror of humanity's comfort with darkness. It wasn't ideology. It was desperation. We rebuilt. Luminara's recording continued, but we were changed. We saw darkness as a cosmic horror that had to be eliminated. Every species we encountered that could survive without constant light became a reminder of our vulnerability. We couldn't bear it. Emma's hand found the emergency broadcast controls. This had to be shared, had to be understood before the conflict escalated further. Broadcasting on all frequencies, she announced, both to human and celestial channels. This is Dr. Emma Blackwood. What I'm about to share will change everything we thought we knew about the Celestial Consortium. She transmitted Luminara's recording, letting the truth flow into space. The Celestials weren't tyrants. They were survivors of an astronomical catastrophe, carrying generational trauma that had shaped their entire civilization. The shadows are rising again. Luminara's final words echoed through the vault. I fear we have become what once nearly destroyed us, a force that denies others the right to exist as they are. Perhaps there is wisdom in the darkness we never sought to understand. Emma's quantum communicator burst to life with incoming responses. The Shadow Confederation leadership, Celestial High Command, Earth's military. Everyone was receiving the truth simultaneously. Computer, get me Admiral Cooper, she ordered. And the Celestial High Command. They need to understand. This isn't about light versus darkness anymore. This is about healing a wound that's thousands of years old. As she waited for the connections, Emma studied the ancient crystal. The Celestials had been running from their trauma for millennia, forcing their fear onto other species. But humans knew something about darkness that the Celestials had never learned. Sometimes, the deepest healing happens in the darkest places. And maybe that was humanity's true role in this conflict, not to fight the light, but to help it make peace with the dark. Lieutenant Colonel James Walker stood in the observation room of the Twilight Chamber, watching as a celestial diplomat voluntarily entered darkness for the first time in their species' history. The chamber, developed through his collaboration with Luxus Prime, was humanity's most ambitious project yet. Not a weapon, but a bridge. Heart rate elevated but stable, Dr. Sarah Miller reported from her station. Luminescence patterns showing anxiety, but not panic. The celestial diplomat, who had chosen the name Dawn, pulsed softly in the gradually dimming chamber. Unlike the terror their species usually displayed, this was controlled exposure, therapeutic darkness. You're doing extraordinarily well, Walker spoke into the comm. His voice, they'd discovered, had a calming effect on their light-based allies. Remember your anchor point. Dawn's light steadied, focusing on the small crystal they'd brought into the chamber, a personal light source, like a child's nightlight. It was a technique Walker had developed, drawing from his experience, helping rescue victims overcome cave trauma. Approaching 30% illumination. Luxus Prime announced, their own crystalline form shimming with excitement. The renegade celestial scientist had been crucial in developing the therapy. This is further than any of our kind has gone voluntarily. Walker nodded, watching the readings. After Dr. Blackwood's discovery of the Celestials' historical trauma, everything had changed. The galaxy wasn't divided between light and dark anymore. It was united in healing. I see it. Dawn's translated voice came through, filled with wonder rather than fear. The patterns. In darkness, there are patterns I never noticed before. That's right, Walker encouraged. Darkness doesn't eliminate information. It reveals different kinds of it. Just like your ancestors could see before the dimming. The chamber continued darkening, carefully monitored by both human and celestial medical teams. Around them, representatives from the Shadow Confederation watched in respectful silence. This wasn't just therapy, it was history in the making. 50% darkness, Miller announced. Vital signs stable. They're actually adapting. Luxus Prime moved closer to the observation window. Do you understand what this means? If we can heal this trauma, our entire society could transform. We've been imprisoned by our fear for millennia. Walker understood perfectly. As a cave rescue specialist turned synapsychologist, he'd seen how facing fears in controlled conditions could overcome even the deepest trauma. The Celestials' fear of darkness wasn't genetic, it was learned. And what was learned could be unlearned. I want to try something. Dawn's voice came through, stronger now. Could one of the Shroudwalkers enter? Walker exchanged glances with Luxus Prime. This hadn't been part of the protocol, but evolution rarely followed protocols. At his nod, a Shroudwalker glided into the chamber, a being of living shadow, once feared by all Celestials. Dawn's light flickered but stabilized, aided by their anchor crystal. I never knew, Dawn whispered. Your darkness, it's not empty. It's alive. It has texture, depth, beauty. The Shroudwalker extended a tendril of shadow, gently intersecting with dawn's light. Where they met, something extraordinary happened, neither light nor shadow, but a new kind of illumination. Recording everything, Miller breathed. This is unprecedented. They're achieving harmonic resonance. Walker felt tears in his eyes. Humanity hadn't needed to defeat the Celestials. They just needed to show them what every human child learned eventually. That darkness wasn't the enemy. It was just the other half of existence. Send the data to all Confederation worlds, he ordered, and to the Celestial High Command. Show them that their oldest fear can become their newest strength. As Dawn and the shrewd Walker continued their dance of light and shadow, Walker thought about how far they'd come. Humanity's aberration, their comfort with darkness, hadn't been a curse after all. It had been the key to healing the galaxy's ancient wound. In the Twilight Chamber, darkness and light finally learned to coexist, and the universe would never be the same.